of Richmond County. So it's a bit like a big mayor's race in a sense. And it's what's that?
Rubio.
What? I couldn't hear you.
Well said.
Yeah, well said. All right, thanks a lot. Sorry, just got to get my coffee this morning. It's going to take me a while to work myself into this, I think. But when I first went out for election in 2006, it was a special election. My predecessor, Sean Connaughton, had gone out for the Bush administration, and I was a conservative. I was on the board before that. I was a district supervisor. I had voted and I fought against the tax increases. It was one of the reasons I ran for chairman. I ran as a conservative, and people said, "Corey, you can't do that. You're not going to be able to win in a place like Prince William County. It's in Northern Virginia. It's the first majority county in Northern Virginia. It had voted consistently for Democrats, and the Democratic judge placed the special election on the federal election day, knowing that there was going to be a higher turnout of voters, and it was going to be more difficult for a Republican to get elected. But I ran on a conservative agenda, and I did win. I won with around 53% of the vote versus 47% for my Democratic opponent, and that was in 2006. It was the same day that George Allen lost. In fact, he lost Prince William County pretty substantially, but I won. And then after I got elected, they told me I couldn't do it. They told me that I couldn't actually implement that agenda. Now we know, they would say, well, we know that you had to campaign that way, but now that you're going to be governing, you need to govern more toward the center and kind of veer away from those conservative ideals. But I didn't. And one of the first things we did was we began to cut spending substantially. We eliminated more than 320 government positions. Some of those were tough decisions. A lot of them were. It was, in some cases, heartbreaking to lay off a worker, even though a government worker. As a result of that effort and others, we cut $143 million worth of spending. So much so that average tax bills in Prince William County today are 30% lower than they are in neighboring Fairfax County, and 30% lower than they are in neighboring Loudoun County. We are by far the lowest tax jurisdiction now in Northern Virginia. After we implemented that, we began what Joe knows, and I was on his show many, many times, was considered to be the nation's toughest crackdown on illegal immigration. When we put it into place, I just thought it was common sense. We enforce the law. If you're here illegally, you should be removed. It's really that simple. Well, other people didn't see it that way. And they protested. And at one point, there were 3,000 protesters outside of our board meeting. So Ken, I know you got a few maybe at your budget hearings, but I don't know what 3,000, but it was pretty bad. At one point, the Washington Post, I was the subject of 3 editorials by the Washington Post, personally attacking me. At one point, they called me a third world despot. Now, I was proud of that one. I actually clipped out that article and sent it back home to Mom and said, "Hey, look, Ma, you raised Idi Amin." I didn't even realize it. So that went on, and the protests continued. And some of my Republican colleagues on the board, after being labeled as bigots and racists and everything else under the sun that you can imagine, began to get a little bit weak-kneed. A lot weak-kneed, frankly. But I had saved up a little bit of money, and I sent out a postcard about half the size of a sheet of paper. I sent it to every household in Prince William County, all 425,000 residents. And say, "Dear resident, we're going to be voting on this crackdown on illegal immigration. If you're interested, please come to the board meeting. If you can't make it, please send an email to the board." 2 days after we sent that out, we knew it hit because I was at a meeting, and I remember I had my BlackBerry and my front pocket of my shirt, it started buzzing, and I thought something was wrong with it because it just kept buzzing. And I looked at it, and these emails were coming in on average 1 every 2 seconds, just continuously. And that went for 4 days. Everybody, by a factor of 10 to 1. Whatever you do, this is the best thing that you losers have ever done, they said. That was the general sense. At last, the government that does what it says it's going to do. Whatever you do, make sure you fund this thing. So we did, and after 12 hours of hearings, we implemented that policy. And today, I can tell you that almost 6,000 criminal illegal aliens have been handed over to the federal government for deportation. Our violent crime rate, and for a big county, where even minor changes to the crime rate are statistically significant. Our violent crime rate has come down in Prince William County by 48.7%. The Washington Post called that a coincidence.
That's praise from them.
That's right. Now, not everybody supported that. There was my neighbor, my counterpart to the north in Fairfax County, Jerry Connolly. He and I know Congressman Connolly, unfortunately. He's a socialist congressman to the north. He was the chairman of the Board of Supervisors for Fairfax County at the time, and he said it wasn't going to save any money, it wasn't going to do anything substantially good, it would only lead to negative things such as racial profiling, yada, yada, yada. Well, you know, as Ken can tell you, every year at budget time, every department, including the school system, comes up in front of the Board of Supervisors to explain what their budgetary needs are. And that year, in 2008, the superintendent of schools for Fairfax County got up in front of the Fairfax Board of Supervisors, Jerry Connolly as chairman, and said, "Mr. Chairman, we need several more $1 million for our schools, unexpected increase in the number of ESOL students. English is a second language. And most of those students have come from Prince William County." Now, Jerry didn't like that answer very much, so he said, "How do you know that they came from Prince William County?" And the superintendent looked back at him and said, "Well, Mr. Chairman, we know because we have the transcripts." True story. You see the transcript? So I tell that story because it is an example of when you stick to your guns. And I believe that acting as a conservative, first and foremost, on any level of government means a rule of law, that you must enforce your laws. That is the first ingredient of any successful civilization. There must be a rule of law, and we put it into place. And as a result of all those efforts, not only was there a reduction in crime, but it saved money in our jails, in our schools, and in our hospitals. There was a so-called conservative, her name escapes me right now, she was in the first Bush administration, attempted Secretary of Labor in the second one. What's her name? She's kind of a faux conservative, you know the type. And she was on the head of the U.S. Human Rights Council or whatever. Anyway, they came to Prince William County and sat up on the dais and grilled me. And one of the questions was, she said, "Well, has this actually saved money in your hospitals?" I said, "Well, it's funny you should ask that." Because I just happen to have the president of Prince William Hospital right here, Michael Schwartz. And he gets the microphone and he says, "Well, actually, what we noticed was that the births to probable illegal immigrant mothers has been eliminated, have gone down by 500 per year." saving the hospitals, of course, millions and millions of dollars over time. So that's my record. I've been able to cut spending, I've been able to cut taxes, I've been able to cut violent crime, and one more thing that I think is important, I've been able to cut regulation. There are several ingredients to successful economic growth. First and foremost, it's important to know this. The first one is, government doesn't create jobs. We get out of the way of creating jobs. What government must do is have streamlined, effective, and low regulation. It needs low taxation, and it needs adequate public facilities, most notably roads and other public infrastructure. And it needs to focus in on those things so as not to blow the budget. When I became chairman of the board, we had a lot of businesses that said, you know, it's too difficult to open up a business or to expand a business in the county. And I went to the bureaucrats in Prince William and I said, well, why is this? He said, well, don't worry about that, Corey. Don't worry about that, because you hear that everywhere you go. Whether you go to Greene County or you go to Loudoun County or you go to Fairfax County, you're going to hear the same complaints by the same business people. They're always going to say that it's too hard to get a permit, yada, yada, yada. Well, that was not a satisfactory answer. So we forced them into a room, literally, with the business community. And to the business community, I said, no, I don't want to hear a bunch of war stories. I want specific recommendations about specific regulations that are burdensome to business. After the course of a couple of days, they came up with a whole list. And as a result of all that effort, we gutted our inspections and permitting processes, and we halved and cut in half the amount of time that it takes to open or to expand a business. Now Prince William County is ranked by the Bureau of Labor Statistics as #1 in job growth in Virginia and #3 in the United States. And I believe it is due in large part to those efforts. Fundamentally, though, I think that economic growth and prosperity, that the greatest blueprint for that, we need not look very far. I think we need to look at our founding principles. I think we need to look at our Constitution. It's about limited government. It's about getting government out of the way. We don't even need expensive economic development efforts. Most job growth is not created by targeting particular businesses or even particular industries to try to lure them into Virginia or into any particular locality. It's about low taxes and low regulation and letting you, as private citizens and private businesses, create the jobs. So I want to end with this. After all that, of putting all that conservative agenda in place, and then in 2008, Barack Obama won Prince William County with 57% of the vote. In 2011, members of my own party told me that I needed to move to the left, that I needed to move to the center, because, and as quickly as I could, because I was never going to get reelected. That Prince William County had become more diverse, it had become more blue, it had become more democratic, and they didn't want to hear about my conservative accomplishments. We didn't do that. In fact, they did just the opposite. What did I do? Most Republicans running statewide or countywide, historically in Prince William County, would go to the western end of the county, which was largely Caucasian and mostly Republican, and try to the extent possible, generate voter turnout, while ignoring the eastern side, the Route 1 corridor of the county, and around the city of Manassas. I, on the other hand, spent 2 years, and in 2011 alone, went to 50 different African-American churches. And what did I do? Well, the first thing I did is I said this: I care about your problems, and I was sincere about it. I want to know, and I want to hear from you what concerns you the most. That's why I'm here. And then I spoke about our conservative ideals. I said, you know, I'm 100% pro-life. I believe that marriage is between one man and one woman. You know about my crackdown on illegal immigration. And we've been successful at creating jobs and bringing more employment into Prince William. Every one of those lines was an applause line. There are some now, after our losses on November 6th, that say that we need to abandon our conservative ideals and embrace everything, from abortion on demand, to gay marriage, to amnesty, to tax increases. Not only would that be immoral, it would be stupid from a political perspective. It is these very principles that are our hook into the minority community. And we must do that. If we do not expand our message to more and more people and broaden our base, we will become extinct as a party. That we know. But it can be done. I believe that I've shown that it can be done. Because in that election of 2011, after sticking to my conservative principles, but reaching out to the minority community, in 2011, I beat my Democratic opponent by 30 points. And I won, this is what I'm most proud of, I won 72 out of 77 precincts in Prince William County, including the heavy minority areas of eastern Prince William County. We knew we won the African American vote, not so well among Hispanics, but we're working on that. And we won a majority of the Asian vote as well. But that's what we've got to do to move forward. Now, I've been thinking a lot about the state of our party, and I'm very concerned, as I know a lot of you are, about the tax increase in Richmond, the $6 billion tax increase. I believe this is the result of a poisoned philosophy that has invaded our country since the 1930s. Generations of politicians believing that the federal government is the answer to our problems and every concern. So they have straddled us with federal entitlements that are unbridled and with federal debt that is unsustainable. We have become what Jefferson feared, an invasive and dominant federal government. We are supposed to be the master of the federal government. We only have one master, and it is God, not the federal government. But if we don't turn this around quickly, that is the servitude in which we have found ourselves and that we are getting our children into. It's not going to happen overnight. It took 3 generations of politicians to sell us into servitude to the federal government. And it will take generations to correct it. Some would say, and they look at the Tea Party movement, and they look at the Ron Paul movement, and the young people that are coming into our party and they're asking why. This is why. They woke up, they grew up to find that generations of Republicans, both Republican and Democrat, have sold their birthright. Life, liberty, and the means to acquire and possess property in the pursuit of happiness. Those are the words of the Virginia Constitution, the Declaration of Rights, written by our own George Mason. So, it is our task, I believe, to begin this fight back and to be patient. We need to spread our conservative ideals and our conservative message, to not ignore any part of the demographic of Virginia. In fact, to make a special effort to reach out into those areas. And we will begin to win. We may not always win. In fact, we may lose a couple more elections before we reverse what has happened. But eventually, that is what we must do, and we must begin. So I ask for your support and your vote on May the 18th. I see this not just as an election for Lieutenant Governor, but I see it as a crusade to begin to reverse the years of damage that has been inflicted upon our party and upon our nation by generations of irresponsible politicians who have refused to make tough decisions. Thank you all very, very much.